All right, let's get to some like round by round targets for edge and defensive line. We did this for the offensive line on Monday, and so we'll do this here. We kind of talked a little bit about guys we'd stay away from on Monday. So if you want to go back and listen to sort of our quote unquote busts for the first or second round, go back and listen to that. We're staying away from Chop Robinson. You know, the Latu kid out of UCLA is maybe not a target. If they're going to take an edge rusher or a defensive lineman in the first round, my number one, it has to be a trade back. I don't think there's anybody that I would feel comfortable with drafting at 7. But if they get back to 11 or 13 or 17 or 18 or whatever, I think we know Dallas Turner certainly on the table and on the board and in the mix then. Do you think Byron Murphy is a piece that they should consider in that range?
No, I would say Jerzon Newton is the guy that you take in that range. I'm not a big Byron Murphy guy. I think I'm one of the I know we're few in numbers, and I think Tavondre Sweat was the better one last year, and I think Tavondre Sweat will be the better overall pro. I think in a trade back,
or Jared Verse,
it would have to be a trade back where you get a lot and move away from the top 2 or 3 offensive tackles. Like that's just kind of where I'm at. I love Dallas Turner. I don't like him as much as Will Anderson. I like Jared Verse, but that's talking about like the Cleveland. You wouldn't even get those guys down there. You would have to trade into the 20s for me to think that you're getting a good value, and you better get plus value in return on the draft. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. Like, yeah, I just don't see a path where you get either of those guys.
I think if you're somewhere in the low teens, like 18, 17, 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there, I think it's Turner.
Back with the Bengals.
I think it's Turner 1, Verse 2, probably Newton or Murphy 3 and 4, probably in that order. And I'm not sure there's anybody else I would consider. I don't want Chop Robinson. I don't want Latu. I don't think there's anybody else I consider in the first round if I'm going defensive line or edge rusher at that point. So we kind of covered a little bit of that on Monday, so we can kind of move on to 38 and number 2. You guys know I love Darius Robinson. Here's the name and I know you love Tavondre Sweat, so we both like those guys. The name that is now moving up my list that I think is in play at 38 is our boy out of Clemson, Rook. I think.
Oh, you listen.
I think
I spent all day Monday at Stacking the Inbox. I dedicated a whole episode to Rook Horhor or whatever his last name is. I love Rook, and I would him and Tavondre Sweat. I have higher than Darius Robinson, and so in the second round, when you're talking about Rook next to and I could be talked into Chris Jenkins or Braden Fisk, but when I am talking like get me hard as hell, raging boners, it's Tavondre Sweat and Rook Horhor.
Like a full chub, a full Bradley Chubb.
I mean,
not a half chub.
I mean, it is a skyscraper busting out of here. I'll be poking people's eyes out when we're drinking whiskey.
Easy, big guy. You're not that tall. You're not that tall.
Listen, that's what they do to me. I mean, they literally write my genetic code.
Okay, all right.
I am all in on those two guys, and I do like Brendan Dorless. I have a hard time figuring out what Brendan Dorless is. Maybe he is just a Danico Autry. Maybe he is just this or that. But like, to me, Tavondre Sweat, I am Rook number 1, Tavondre Sweat number 2, Darius Robinson number 3. I'm just in love with Rook. Everything that he does, he's explosive, he's fast, he's feisty, he's got hands, he's got attitude. Everything that Rook does, I love.
So I think there's 2 groups of players here. I think there's guys that you take at 38. And my guy first is Darius Robinson, who I think really actually is Danico Autry. I think that's actually how he profiles, and the versatility. He's not going to be your speed edge rusher. You've got that already in Key and Landry. You need somebody who's a little bit more, sort of a tweener there that can slide in and play different roles on different downs. That's why I like Darius Robinson. Number 2 is Rook for me. And then number 3 would be Sweat. I think there's another group of players, though. So like 38, there's those 3 guys for me. I think hypothetically a trade back to like 50, let's say, give or take a few spots, 50 or 55. Then I think there's a whole collection of guys that includes the guys you mentioned. I think Brandon Dorless is in that group. Chris Jenkins is in that group. Braden Fisk is in that group. I think you have to move down to that group and you need to move back a few spots. I'm not sure any of those guys I love at 38, but I kind of really like him at like 52. So
Yeah.
I think
I would agree with that.
that's like a
And I like
next
Chris
tier.
Braswell at 38, but it's going to really depend on who else is on the board for me to be like Chris Braswell's like that fourth guy that I'm fine with, but I want to see who else is there. So like here's where I'm at with Root. And this is how it was with Justin Matabuke when he was coming out as a prospect. I loved Justin Matabuke as a prospect. I love Rook. In 4 years, when free agency comes around, everybody's going to be saying, man, I really hope Rook Ohorioho comes out and hits free agency because I want my team to sign him. And guess what? He ain't going to hit free agency. He's going to get franchise tag. Then he's going to get an extension for whatever team he's on because he's going to be that good. I am putting the full weight of my draft predictions on Rook Ohorioho being the best second-round defensive lineman.
What do you think is a higher priority for the team? Is it a hand in the dirt, true tackle, or even versatile end with Simmons? Is it a true pass rusher that's off the edge? Like Dallas Turner is a pure outside linebacker pass rusher off the edge. Latu is a pure pass rusher off the edge.
Yeah.
Whereas Darius Robinson, a little bit more versatility. Rook is the versatility Denico Autry guy as well. Like, what do you think is a higher priority for the defense?
The way they talk and the way they've approached free agency, I would assume edge.
Really?
Like a straight guy straight across like a Chris Braswell,
Jared Verse,
Braylon Trice, a guy like that can actually line up and be the guy that comes in from that side. Maybe you could get that in Adisa Isaac. You could get that, who I like better than his counterpart, Chop Robinson. Maybe you get that in Austin Booker. But maybe one of the Murphys who test really well and who have really good stats. You got Mo Camara. And I know we're kind of getting into it, but like that's kind of where I'm at, is that like I think edge is the priority, but I think that is the harder position to draft in this draft.
Agree.
Because where you are currently slotted in your draft position is going to be really hard, especially with so many other needs. So I think really to answer your question, the most realistic way to attack it is to go for the guy that can either go straight hand in the dirt or do both. Not the guy. I think it's going to be really hard to find the guy that can stand up and be the opposite of Harold Landry.
Like, is Marshawn Nealand in that group?
I like Marshawn
in the second round.
I like Jalix Hunt. To me, Jalix Hunt is a guy that is, I don't know how he's still going. He's so far down the list, personally. But to me, Jalix Hunt is a guy that was at the Senior Bowl, tested really well. I think he's going to be really good. I would say that he probably goes, I think he goes higher than what people think, but I don't know. The general consensus is that, like, you can't even draft him on PFF. Like, what the fuck is that? You can't even draft Jalix Hunt on PFF.
Yeah. I got, so let's go to 106 here, top of the fourth round. I got Braden Fisk in a recent mock draft at like a 106.
That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. I don't think Chris Jenkins falls that far, but he's a no-brainer if you take him there. Dorless, same thing. So there's a lot of those guys in that second tier that if they fall, you automatically do it. Who are you targeting at 106 that you think could be available, but also as somebody you like for the Titans?
I like other players, just so we can clarify to everybody. We're doing just this position by round by round. These are not players that I would prefer over a wide receiver or anything.
Here, I'll set you up.
Dwayne Carter, McKinley Jackson are two guys that are really high on my list in the fourth round. It seems Leonard Taylor keeps falling down consensus draft boards. I don't agree that he's going to be there, but I could be talked into a Leonard Taylor there more than I could in the second round. But to me, I think out of the realistic options, you're looking at Mason Smith. I think Mason Smith could still be there.
That's who I want. That's who I want.
But he's rising up draft boards too. I like Dwayne Carter, McKinley Jackson, Mekhi Wingo is another guy from LSU.
Yep.
Those are four guys that I think that, depending on what happens in the draft, could be there in the fourth round that provide you the juice that you need that you couldn't get in free agency or get somewhere else.
There's three that I like: Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo, and McKinley Jackson. Those are the three that I like at 106. That if we're, and again, Derek says Javon Baker. We are talking just edge, and we are targeting edge players for every round. We did offensive line. We're going to come back and do receivers and tight ends at another time. We've got lots of weeks to go until the draft. So we're just focused on each position sort of targets throughout the draft. And what when you do mock drafts, it's hard to know how accurate they are. But when you do mock drafts in these simulators online, which is fun about them, is that they teach you where certain players are kind of should be slotted. And so you can see these are the defensive edge rushers and linemen that I like in the first round at 12, 13, 14. These are the ones I like at 38. These are the ones I like at 106. And you can sort of see who may or may not be available. At those
Gabe
spots.
Murphy, Mo Camara, those are guys that could be there at that point, and I'd be fine with this too. As far as edge guys,
it's hard to find. Here's what I'll say. It is hard to find edge rushers that I really like beyond the 38th pick.
It's hard to find edge rushers that give you more than Arden Key, because that's really what you need, right? You need something more than Arden Key, and that's the problem that they are in right now, is that they do have so many holes they still have to fill. Like, I know they want edge, but I don't think you're going to get the quality of edge that you need in this draft. Unless something crazy happens.
I agree. Unless one of those guys in the first round falls to 38, or they love, a Darius Robinson's versatility or Chris Braswell, I think your last chance to get a true edge pass rusher is right there at 38. Ed says, do you think versatility along the defensive line is big for this regime as it was in the past? My first take, and I'll let you go after this, my first take is they want everything to be versatile. Positionless football across every position, and they wanted to re-sign Danico Autry, so that tells you how much they want the versatility.
I agree.
All right, there we go. All right, so moving on. Give me some guys you like, 5th, 6th, 7th round. You can lump them all together. It's hard to find defensive linemen and edge rushers in this stage of the draft. I think you have to use one of your first 3 picks on one if you want one.
I think 5th is, if you can't find edge and you're at the 5th round and you can go ahead and take Jalix Hunt, I'm all in. I think I believe in Jalix Hunt a lot. I like Jalix Hunt. I think Grayson Murphy and Nelson Caesar are guys that you could get in that range. Cedric Johnson doesn't really do it for me. You could talk me into Miles Cole as well. But other than that, I mean, you look at the edges that come through here, I'm just like, oh, this is just kind of like you kind of have to skip it if you don't find your guy. I think after the 5th round, edge rusher is going to dry up.
Now,
and so I'm kind of like, I think I'm good.
I agree. So let me throw something out at you that we did not intend to talk about, but I've noticed this. And we talk about this all the time with quarterback. And I think it's okay to talk about it with edge rushers. Next year, there is a chance you have 4 or 5 top 10 edge rushers in the draft. Doesn't mean they're all going to go there. Somebody might fall down a board or move up a board. But James Pierce out of Tennessee, Harold Perkins out of LSU, you got Ethan Burke out of Texas, you got Landon Jackson out of Arkansas, both Ohio State players. There's a chance you have 4 or 5 edge guys that grade out at sort of like the way the tackle class is graded out this year. You could have 5 or 6 guys that are like in that top 15 range. So just a note to keep an eye on, just something to think about, that if you can't get your edge guy in the first 2 picks, which I think you have to do, you could get a defensive lineman, let's say at 106, Mason Smith, Wingo, Jackson, whatever, knowing full well that you go into next year's draft because you drafted a tackle and you've signed a corner and a receiver, that edge might be your number 1 need going into the draft next year, and there's a good edge class in the first round potentially next year. Just worth pointing out.
Yeah. I will say this, your defensive line is filled with guys that you could take chances on that could probably turn into maybe tier charts, maybe Danico Autry's, the high-end guys that are better than Sebastian Joseph Day or could develop into better than Sebastian Joseph Day. I mean, you look at Logan Lee, Jordan Jefferson, Gabe Hall, Keith Randolph Jr., Jaden Crumedy, Fabian Lovett, I think, who is going way too low. I think he'll go actually a lot higher than what people have him at. But those are just some of the names that, I mean, because you got the kids from Auburn, Justin Rogers, Marcus Harris.
I like those guys too.
So you got a lot in that 6th, 7th round where if you miss out on maybe a Tavondre Sweat or one of those, you decide to pivot, in the second round, do something different. I think the defensive line class is kind of a little sneaky underrated with its depth. And
I completely agree.
And I think that's one of those classes where you're going to be like, man, there was a lot of defensive linemen in this class that turned into capable starters.
And it's why I think Mason Smith is going to skyrocket, because if he doesn't get hurt, he is a top 35, top 40 pick. And so I think he's going to move up board. So I don't think he's there at 106, but if he is, you take him right away. I think he's going to have a great NFL career. I feel like him the way you feel about Rook, but like in a different tier. So anyway, I agree with you. I think the defensive line class is worth taking a chance on in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. I think if you can get a great edge in the 1st or 2nd, go for it. But I think otherwise that's not necessarily the position you need to address. You can make do with what you got, Landry, Key, and Weaver. You can make do with that if you have a good interior and some good secondary pieces, which Rand Carthon, by the way, acknowledged. He said, we used to have a great front line. Now we are inverted and have a really good secondary. They've got to go address the trenches in the draft. That's what they're going to do.